Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
With an ever-increasing demand for potassium due to increasing crop yields, there is a need for a better source of potassium with improved availability and uptake potential. Alpine K-Tech is the most plant-available form of potassium and is able to enter the plant quickly and easily. As a foliar application, K-Tech is tank mixable with many crop protection products, thereby increasing the grower's resource use efficiency. K-Tech offers balanced fertility and an added energy source for the plant. The latest development of premium crop nutrition is doing a lot more with a lot less for your crops. Learn more at www.alpinepfl.com.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. I am so excited to have you guys back this week. We are speaking to a very special guest, Kelly Dobson. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. And we're talking about a topic that I find very fascinating and very important for the farming world. And it is the farm CEO. So, are you ready to go?
I think so.
Good.
I'll do my best.
Okay. So, before we hop into the conversation and talk all about the farm CEO and what that is, can you tell our audience a little bit about you, your background?
Sure. So, like you guys, I'm a fourth generation farmer. I've been farming full time for about 25 years in the southwest corner of the province of Manitoba. And I've had a lifelong fascination with leadership. It wasn't called that at the time. It was just called people achieving and winning and doing things together that we didn't think we could otherwise do. I came from a small school, so if you ever did anything, punching way above your weight, it was important. So I would say I've always had a fascination with leadership, and I took an opportunity 5 years ago to go back to grad school and get a graduate degree in leadership. And that's when I got my eyes wide open about what this was, and then trying to understand, this had huge implications for what goes on in small business and in agriculture.
Okay.
So that's when I figured I'd always had an interest in working with other farmers and organizations, so LeaderShift was born, and here we are.
That's excellent. Okay, so I am excited to hear about this. You are actually doing a mini-series called The Farm CEO with Country Guide, I believe, right?
Country Guide.
What is the farm CEO?
Well, it's a broad idea, right? I think when I say CEO, everybody thinks of someone who's thinking at a very high level.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. The way I put it in a way I put it in the article is I would think of it as an idea of like a complete leader or someone who has a total package. And I think this is the big idea. So the way I wrote about it is think of it as 3 R's. We all know that we have to achieve results. And so I think people are good at that in the short term, but the bigger idea is what I do in the moment is it aligns with what I need to get done. It aligns with what my business is in the short and medium term, but it also connects and aligns with my community and even in my sector.
Okay.
And then I can think in those layers from the tractor seat. So in other words, what I'm doing, how I'm applying, I understand why it benefits me, and also how this might impact others. And to think of that in that level of complexity.
Okay.
On the other side of it, we know that there is connecting, there's a big part is about relationships. And I think for those of you guys who maybe look for something to read over the holidays, Google Farmer 4.0 Royal Bank of Canada. They've got a report about where they see agriculture and people in the next 10 years.
Okay.
And one of their major assertions is that going forward, farmers are going to have to be. It's not going to be this idea. When I say leadership, most people think about a leader and a whole bunch of followers. In reality, it's actually not so much. That does exist, but in agriculture, it's about leading self. It's leading within my small business, but it's also these lateral, external relationships. Because as we try and push the results and within our farm, we're going to be far more reliant on experts and leading those relationships, and working through very complex ideas. It could be farm transition. It could be how we might use all of that data that we're downloading in the farm currently on sticks and maybe not doing a whole lot with, and how that might actually be leveraged in the next 10 years. And that's going to require the use of experts. So I just think in my business, from where my dad started, I bet you I have double the number of experts that I work with from where I was 20 years ago. Yeah. And how we manage those relationships for positive results matters. And it doesn't matter because I say so, it matters because that's what the research is showing up and who's succeeding and who's not.
Okay.
So the last one I would call resiliency. I think in the article I called it well-being. But the other part that's showing up, and this is I think the bigger idea about being a farm CEO, is that most of the focus on the farm is about what do I do that has a positive impact on my business. And so it's all business focus.
Production focus.
Production, what I'm doing,
Yes.
and how can I benefit the farm. But what we're noticing now is that at the very highest levels, we need to put ourselves inside of that circle. So in other words, what about myself can I cultivate or improve that's going to, so when I show up in and on my business, is going to drive higher and better results.
Okay.
And that's a much bigger idea than I think most people are aware of, because it does fit down to things like, I think we tend to have a look at it in terms of when things aren't going so well, like we look at it from an idea of mental health, or we may look at it in terms of workplace stress. But if we turn and look on the other side, how could I develop myself over time as an everyday way of practice that continually makes my ability and skill set relevant and meeting all of that crazy opportunity that's out there, which I've talked about VUCA. If you read any of my articles, I think I say VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous in almost every article. How do I develop myself to be ready for that?
Okay.
Kind of like in the off season, let's say if you're an NHL hockey player, what is my training regime in the off season? That's when we put all that together, that's what I think about a mindset of a complete leader or a farm CEO.
And I like it, and this idea of the farmer CEO. I come from the entrepreneurial space.
Sure.
Building a business. In the entrepreneurial world, it's almost a bit of a joke now, everybody's a CEO,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, any small business, you are the CEO. And that means so many different hats and so many different skills. And when we were first getting ready to talk about this, I'm like, the farm CEO, yes, that mentality needs to happen. Where would you see the difference in the way a typical farmer operates right now to where they should be? I guess that's a lot of what you just said. That.
Yeah, I think it is, but I'll put it this way. I think some of the challenges of why is it hard to think like a CEO, particularly in agriculture?
Yes.
And I'll talk about that. I'll tell you why it's really hard. It's hard because most of these businesses are multi-generational.
Okay.
And so there is a high, and so the tenure of a CEO is a very long path, and then one day you get it, and then you have it, and you hold on to it, and you're in there until at some point you either cannot do it anymore, or maybe you have something else that attracts you. It is not nobody got into this to be a CEO.
Right.
We got in it because we really love the business. It's part of what our family. It's I would say significantly about identity. You know, I am my farm. If I'm farm successful, I'm successful. If I'm not successful, my farm's not successful. And so it can be really challenging. And because it's small business, there is very little delineation between and I've talked about this in my earlier articles, the challenging and the cool part about being a farm CEO and why LeaderShift has had to really change models on how we deliver service compared to, let's say, other executive coaching services that might be in Toronto or Montreal, Vancouver, is I'm dealing with people who have phones that are vibrating off the table, that's not dissimilar. But they could be talking to you underneath a truck trailer as they're adjusting a brake pod. Or doing whatever simultaneously. So they have the appearance and do duties of a frontline leader, of a frontline labor and leader, and simultaneously are making six-figure decisions on the fly.
Yeah.
And there's not this space of difference where I get to sit in my office and I just got to think about strategy. Where's this business going to be in 5 years, and that's my entire purpose. It's not. We still have to play both games, and that's what makes it extraordinarily challenging. And invariably, people got it because they liked it. They liked running equipment. They still do like running equipment. And this other stuff, it can push up against our own abilities. It can push up against the stuff maybe we're not strong at. But yet we know from the research of the stuff that's the big differentiator between average and very successful. So it's not something that can be avoided. And so it's I have to consciously choose to step into that, because it's so easy to get lost in doing, I can just drive a truck, or I can just run my combine, or I can do the things I like to do, and it can get pushed off. And you can't outsource it. That's the other part. Farmers, I think early on when things started getting more complex, whether it been marketing services or what have you, many tried to outsource the responsibility of having to make those hard choices, and they thought that they could do it, and then when they didn't get the results they liked, then they just fire the advisor, going, well, they're there to provide information. Ultimately we still need to be able to pull all those levers. And you can't I don't think you can outsource that.
Reminds me a lot of some experiences I've had.
How does that land for you?
Well, I'm gonna rate keep my answer a little bit rated, but jokes aside, I have built Farm Marketer, so sure. I'm gonna compare that to a farm operation. And when you're saying that, that's exactly what I went through building Farm Marketer. I started off with an idea and what I wanted to do in the marketplace. And then you realize you need to be sales, marketing, accounting, HR, compliance, all of these different things. And it takes a wide skill set.
Yeah.
And it also takes attention, thoughtful attention too. Because one of the things I found, same as farmers, where everybody out there, I think we can find enough to do on the farm to keep us going from morning to night. So I imagine, and I can relate, and I've felt this, a lot of farmers are probably sitting there going, oh brother, the farm CEO, I am so busy.
Yeah, you can feel the eye roll.
I can feel it. I can see it, guys. I see it right through the camera. And I can see it and feel it because I've done the eye roll. And where I said, oh, I gotta do that. Hey, I gotta make sales. I gotta make sure this website's working. I gotta get out to trade shows. But you know what I found? It is so easy to get lost in the weeds of production, right? Farming.
Of the doing.
That you forget to stop and work on the business instead of in the business. And correct me if I'm wrong, when I heard this from the entrepreneurial space, they said, you really need to stop and work on your business. Because if you're so busy morning to night working on the farm, you're not taking quiet, thoughtful time to learn, to research. One might even say, and I've probably done it, you're just doing the status quo, day in, day out, because you got to get going. Where if you put the CEO hat on and some of the stuff we're going to talk about, you're being the CEO, the visionary, right? Is that right?
There's an awful lot there. I think there's at least 2 books
yeah.
in there. Here's how I would construct this. I would say one is it's about so the classic coaching question that people might come up with. I'd say, what's at risk if I don't step into this?
That is my next question. Tell me the ROI. I'm a busy farmer.
Sure.
And this all sounds a little bit fluffy to me right now.
Yeah.
What is the payoff, the results, the risk, Kelly?
Well, here's what I can tell you, brass tacks, is that this stuff tends to remain fluffy until at the individual level they understand what it truly means for them. And when they can see how they're showing up and what may be lost opportunity, like opportunity cost, or what they may see might not be what might be potential, then they get it instantaneously. Until that action moment happens, until they take that time, it generally presents as, yeah, it's a nice to do, it's a CEO, it's a very broad idea. What we know, and this is the part that I think that took me by big surprise, is that leadership and this idea of an executive mindset is well studied. I mean, qualitatively, quantitatively, there are numerous organizations that have 100,000 assessment databases, and they're now putting analytics, just like we are, where they're talking about big data going into ag. They've already got analytics going on to leader assessments, and they're sifting through qualitatively and quantitatively what's really going on. Why are some achieving significantly more results than others? And by the numbers, what we realize is that those that are shown to have an executive mindset, or which would be in the literature would we say high leader effectiveness, are shown to have stronger business results. And it's not linear. Like, this is the other part. Like, think of your field. All the field doesn't have, we may have a farm average for yield in that field, but we know that there's areas that underproduce. We know that there's a big part that makes decent money, and then there's those areas in the field that produce, that's the part we like to take the picture when we're going along and it has a super high yield, and we have those that are super high. What we know is that that's the way leader effectiveness is in a sample group. So it's not, so if I just improve a little bit, it's not like I'm going to get a little bit better. What we know is that the difference between the very, very top, like the very, very top farmers, are very likely their businesses are making substantially more profits and are substantially more successful than the average. In other words, there's an absolute dollar figure, there's an absolute financial argument for the business of making self a priority and thinking of myself as a competitive advantage in my business, an asset or a resource that needs to be cultivated and taken and cultivated to be developed. Because when people realize that it comes right down to a choice in the moment of what I say or do next can have six-figure results, and high pressure, high stakes. And I've seen this when you talked about doing that. I think in the wintertime, I think people are a little more reflective. They go to conferences, they're in community, they're a little less stressed. So I see that going on more and more. But what I continually see is that there's not a mindset being exercised at some of the busiest times of year. And what I've seen time and again is that choices don't get made, or choices do get made that are not optimum because they're so busy gripping onto that hydrostat. And there are times where I think there's this idea of how can I position myself to be really thinking about what's in the best interest now, 6 months from now. How are we handling this? Who are those conversations? And time and again, there's always a story comes up of somebody who didn't, and it's had significant negative consequences for the business because they were in the business and not sitting back and saying, no, what, we're not doing this. Yeah. We're going to do this different. We need to call somebody. And they can shift a contract, they can do this, they can, and this boils down to things like safety on the farm. It has any number of implications that go right to the bottom line. But nobody looks at it from a framework of what's the mindset of the person who's making all these decisions, and how do all the people around them make choices about what they do or don't do.
Okay.
So it's a complex space.
I hear a lot of mindset.
Yeah.
It's a lot of mindset, and maybe for me, when I was building for a marketer, it was a little easier to just slap that CEO title on because that's normal. I think it's a mindset thing for farmers where I could see if I was a farmer on my operation, maybe I work with a few people, family, one hired man, woman, whatever the case is, it might be a little harder to think of myself as a CEO, right?
Yeah.
That's really a mindset. And when you're saying CEO, it is a mindset. And leadership, when you talk about leadership, I always have this bad habit of going to Steve Jobs and Apple. When I think leadership, I think of the guy or the gal in the big forum talking to 400 employees. Leadership is really about self-leadership, farm leadership, right?
When you get to a model, like when you break it down in the way it's studied, it actually all talks about, really comes down to personal performance. In other words, what skills and abilities, which are actually all underpinned by a whole unconscious thought and belief system. In other words, how I see and believe about the world alters how I really influences how I behave. And how I then go out into my farm and a business, my community, my sector, drives the kinds of relationships and how people interact with me. So it doesn't actually matter whether it's 1 on 4 or 1 on 4,000 or 40,000. It's the same phenomenon at work. And the models all scribe down, like at the end of the day, and whether you're a CEO or you're a private entrepreneur, that's the same assessment that's delivered. Like the assessment that we do is the same one that's used on major CEOs worldwide.
Okay.
It's not changed because the rigor doesn't change.
Okay. And
so that and the data that comes back is reviewed up against that, and it's put into that normative database because we compete on a global scale, and it's not different. I mean, people would like to think we're different. We're not. Like, we're still human, and we still have all the same challenges, and we're still going to achieve as people in that business as anybody else would. It's different. I mean, it's contextually different, but it's the same systems. I mean, there's no well, this doesn't apply here, or this doesn't work. It's like, well, here's the other piece stat. They haven't found a sector or a part of business where it doesn't apply.
Okay, that tells
you.
Yeah.
It absolutely does, and that's so much when I see. Like, for example, I'm the only kid in my school bus who's actually still farming.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is the part I always challenge people when they say, well, does this really apply or not apply? Over the long term, Every farm is going to be exposed to the same opportunities of technology, labor, climate, markets. Why is it why some people are stunningly successful, most people are okay, and some people don't, business don't continue?
Yeah. There you go.
Why? And what we know is that significantly, there's lots of reasons, but we know statistically something like about a big third of that is actually can be directly correlated to leader effectiveness. It's not the whole thing, but it's significant.
Mindset. I keep on using those words interchangeably almost, right?
Yeah.
The mindset. I'm the CEO. I need to make sure that this organization.
And when I coach, so when I'm coaching some of these farms and people in them, one of the conversations that's actually showing up, there's some trends. I would say one of the trends that comes up is helping people step into the fact that it's like, it really is, I really am that person. Like we're having challenges or opportunities going on, and I need to get people lined up inside my business or my family, and people are looking to me like, if I don't do it, who will?
Yeah.
And so they're finally coming to the point of going, I think I got to grab the brass ring and say, and it's not for pure power, it's because it's what is needed.
Yes.
And people want it. Like people want to know that there is someone who's collectively working, creating that alignment and creating that interplay where everybody knows what their role is, and there's a way that everyone can work collectively together, but there's someone who's got it, who's holding that space, so it can allow people to do their best work. And so much of that is that people are finally realizing this thing's too big. It's too big. I can't do it all. And you talk about
it is
about too big. A lot of this is what we're finding is it's not enough to train people. We have to actually support them to get into a practice so that they can create the space to actually fulfill more of those roles, which means about training other people. It means making sure that those partnerships we talked about are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the ones that aren't need to go. So that allows that time through the day, every day, to do that, to fill those roles. And if we work it correctly, that happens. But it's not without design. Like there's an intention that has to go with that, because otherwise you just one day bleeds into the next. So.
Well, funny you said that, because when I first heard of the concept, I actually started CEO Friday, where I would work on my business and not in it. I tried to do that from the office, but then I found you're in the everyday. My team's around, they're respectful, but you're still there and accessible. And then as we know, we get interrupted and we lose track, right? Client needs help, whatever it is. So I started CEO Fridays, and that would be when I would work on the different parts of my business.
Yeah.
Marketing, advertising, sales, innovation, making sure I'm legally protected, all of those things, putting on that CEO cap. And before, I didn't do that. I just day to day running to get things done. Some of the best things that have happened in this business have come from that CEO mindset. This show, I would like to say, had I not taken the time to sit back and reflect, where are we going in the future? What are the needs of farmers, and how do they want to consume content? What do they want to know about? Had I been doing the day in, day out, I would have been doing farm marketer status quo. For me, and everything you say, I relate it personally here as an example for the audience that they can take in the farm. Right?
See, in my personal story about this would be that when I started LeaderShift, I mean, I think the natural part and the tension in my family was that, I'm going to be taking my eye off the ball. The odd part happened is that I think my farm is actually better managed now than it was before I had LeaderShift. And there's no 25th hour in the day.
Wow.
I'm finding that and this is a part about when we step into increasing our leader effectiveness, the lowest hanging fruit that people report is that they're still really busy, but they're achieved, but it's not about, but the standard is not, am I busy? I mean, we're farming, we can just be busy all the time. I am more productive, I get more done for the hours that I put in, more gets achieved, and that may be by me, but often now it's through me.
Okay.
And that's a very important concept to get close with. The second part is that I'm doing way more balls in the air, like I'm literally adding a whole other ball, or maybe it's more balls, and my stress isn't any higher. In fact, I think it's lower. I know, these are not,
Caramel secret
these are
here.
not, well, and I can't say, but,
I like it.
but people are talking about going, things are so much better, so much more productive, but I don't feel any more stressed out. And then secondly, they'll say, you know what, and better yet is that they're reporting that people that are close to them, so they're saying a lot of it will report spouses or immediate family members, say that they are, that they like this person more. They are more who they are and not this other person that's constantly feel like they're under pressure. And so they're just generally a nicer person to be around. They're easier to work with. They find that the relationship sides are stronger.
Okay.
And so there's a payoff in all this, because all of those systems that work in a business, they actually are the same kinds of systems that actually work in, they apply, because leader
all the
vectors,
same.
well, like they're, for example, they're even applying some things like family systems theory, which would be completely designed for family counseling. They're actually applying some of those concepts in business now, because they actually understand why people do and do not get along or work, or why those office dynamics are the way they are.
Ooh,
and they're
boy.
fairly and we actually incorporate them in our program, because the joy of a really good system, like a thinking like a farm CEO, is that if you can apply it, like if you can pick it up and understand it and it works and it's repetitive, like people can understand it and they can keep applying it, and it has high levels of applicability. So like, I can understand what's going on here because I understand this, and I'll try it, and you know what, things are better. Those are some of the magic of being able to apply some of this stuff. It doesn't have to be all, what are we really talking about? There are real hard concepts that we train people to get into, and they start saying, now I understand why things are the way they are.
Excellent.
I get it.
That's some good stuff. The caramel secret right there.
Well, it is for me. Like I say, I'm very passionate about this. I think it's given me like a second win even at my own farm. I get a sense of being able to, it's given me a great deal of arm's lengthness, so like I would say what we would call differentiation, where I see like I am not just a farmer, I'm a person who just happens to own a farm. And that power of that, like a CEO, like there's me and then there's this business, and that level of separation is a big part. Now that's like, for many people in front, like that's a white knuckle experience, but when they can actually look at it more objectively, the upside is often that the decisions get way less emotional and way less about the right calls.
I went through that too, because we all love what we do here at Farm Marketer, farmers. I had the same thing. I used to introduce myself, hi, I'm Farm Marketer, as a joke, but not really, because I identified with the business. And then finally I moved through that and thought more like a CEO and said, no, I'm Tracy Burnett that owns Farm Marketer. I'm a CEO and this is what I do, right? And you're right, you're not as emotional. Because if I am Farm Marketer versus this is a business, you're way more objective when you're working on a business.
And
right?
the big thing we realize that people come to when they start adopting this, and when we train them up, is that when they start realizing how much of how they decide or don't decide to do things is a result of themselves and not really based on evidence or based on the best interest, but it's like imagine it's like a firmware in your combine. You can't understand why it won't do what it's supposed to do because there's some iOS system that's not working. We all have one, and when they become understanding what unconscious thoughts and beliefs are driving, like that just drive the decisions for why did I do that? Why did we make this call? Like how did we get here? How did we get ourselves into this situation? When they start realizing that a lot of that is them and stuff they don't wear, and when they can recognize that and they can create that, that is by default, I would say you've reached a CEO mindset at that point, because you get it. You get there's the me and there's the business, and I get what I want to do or don't want to think. I'm really inclined to do, and then I know there's wait a second, what's the right way to look at this, or is there a right way to look at this?
Yeah. I love everything that we just spoke about, and I think this concept of the farm CEO, as farmers and business owners, we gotta not roll those eyes and really open up the mind and think about that. I know personally, when I switched from a doer and just a small business owner to the CEO mindset, my business results just multiplied. It really did. And I think at the end of the day, farmers out there, they're always looking for the X factor. What is that? A better variety, more yield, better machinery, better genetics, whatever that is. And sometimes, I know in the entrepreneurial world, we know here is a big X factor.
Yeah. And
when I heard that you were working on this material and trying to promote this, I had to have you on the show, because I think this is a definite X factor for farmers. Now, my question, there are farmers at home and they are intrigued. What are some actionable steps that they can start on right away to start thinking like a CEO? I know you work with farmers, coaching in your program.
So a couple things I'd say right off the top. First of all, it's perfectly okay if there's a big part of you that says, that there's just a high level of resistance. That would be the polite way to say it, right? That it's just resistant to the idea.
You got to go through that.
Yeah. And I would say the other part is it's like, well, I'm already doing it. And I would say from what I would say, yeah, absolutely. What I've learned about all this is that becoming the total package is actually where all the results start going. Like that's actually what the research says. Is that 2 out of 3 of those 3 R's that are actually have, like imagine underneath all of those, there's like 6 competencies under each one of those. So there's like an 18, modality. If you're only hitting 12 out of the 6, 12 out of the 18, or 14 out of the 18, if some of those missing parts are really important in your workplace context right now, it drops everything else.
Yes.
And that's the part where people say, well, I'm just going to focus on what I'm good at. And you should. But what the research says is that if we don't balance out those the weaker areas and bring them up to a level of sufficiency, it pulls down the strengths.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part where I would just encourage this, and because we're getting into the slow season, I would invite anyone to take some time and think about if there has ever been a time where you actually spent time focusing on yourself and investing in yourself. Many people think about investing in themselves and they buy themselves a sled. or
best investment.
Yeah.
New truck. I'd go for the new truck.
But again, the focus is usually outward. I would invite people to think really carefully about the last time and what do they do throughout the day or even throughout the week that actually invests in themselves and actually creates the stuff that would actually optimize themselves as a person. Because if the answer is, well, sometimes I do or I want to, well, that would be perfectly normal. But what we know is that that's an invitation to say that there's something more, that there's an opportunity there. And here's the thing. I know you're looking for some quick low-hanging fruit, but what we know about what the research says is that until we can identify that to the individual, that's the point where it becomes high impact. In other words, when I coach or we put people through the program, it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Okay.
It very much comes to a very individualized approach because every person has a unique background. Even though you may be in the same industry, you might be doing more or less the same stuff, you didn't come from the same family.
No.
And you didn't come in the same birth order, and there's a whole history there. And there's an opportunity there if we could figure out what is that one thing that if they focused on it, they could have impacted if they worked on increasing it, like just small changes, and you layer on these small improvements to the point that there's an actual shift in how I show up. That's where we start cooking with gas. Like that's the magic. And so the invitation is to say, I wonder what that might be. That could create that.
Okay.
And if that is in any way interesting to you at all, then I think that's the time to, at whatever convenience to look forward. Like again, there are opportunities in ag, not many. That's why LeaderShift is here, because I think when it comes to being able to access that rurally, there's not a lot. And that's why we've had to design LeaderShift the way it is and the program the way it is. So I would, I'd be happy. I mean, I'd take any call, and it's on a first one, and just to see where people are at and what their general interest is and where they come from. So I'd be open to that.
I might put you on the spot right away.
Okay.
Do you, you pose that question, do you have any other favorite coaching moments, coaching questions for farmers? Game changers? I guess that's really vague, and I'm probably putting you on the spot.
Here's one. Think about this year. If things keep going exactly the way they are you going to achieve what you want? Many people hope for something different but don't do anything about it. It is like the veritable definition of insanity.
I love that one.
And this is the place, I dare say, this is the place where midlife crisis is born. Because it is, as, I don't know about you, but as I get older, the years just melt off. Like, it just seems like we measure them in 3-year increments.
I'm 29 and holding.
Right.
Yes.
And I noticed that.
Oh, good guy.
And this is the part where oftentimes it's one of those key questions that if I keep doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it, going forward, am I likely to, when I look back, am I going to have regret? Am I going to be able to achieve, realistically, am I going to be able to achieve what matters most to me? I mean, in the full package, the business, family, whatever your what matters most buckets are. And if the answer is, unequivocal, I'm not sure, or you don't have a defined plan of what that looks like, or if you're having to make choices between them, that's a signal. That's a signal that there's opportunity there.
Okay, I like it. And I know you've worked with many, many farmers. You are a farmer, so you understand. You coach.
Yep.
And you're available for coaching if anyone in our audience is interested in really jumping in and embracing that. They can give you a call, chat a little bit more,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
I know you also do the National Farm Leadership Program.
Yep.
Do you want to chat on that just a little bit here?
Yeah, I do, because I think just to give people maybe a bit of a teaser, I didn't actually start into this thinking I was going to be a coach, and I didn't start thinking I was going to run a leader development program.
How did that come about?
It started when I started working with farmers and and then I realized that many of them have had little or no personal professional development. They are whip smart on the production and on the business on the farming side, but when they understand what's not working from a human system standpoint or across relationships, particularly as they get more and more complex, many didn't even have the vocabulary to even the conceptual understanding of what was happening. And as I tried to work, and they were looking for results. They're like calling me up like as if I'm tech support for John Deere, and I'm just going to run the diagnostics. Like, well, if you just do this, this, and this, it'll all be good. And they realize, well,
oh, I like that.
It doesn't exactly work like these are human systems. So they are the most complex system that we know.
Yeah.
Even taking AI as it currently sits. And so what I realized was that if people had just a basic understanding of leadership, like some basic tools, and had some basic ways to get some self-awareness, so that they could get into a practice, which is the whole point of this. Is the difference between transitioning, that they have a practice that actually over time will increase their ability. In other words, it's not enough to just go read a book. We know what the translation of, like, if you crawl into bed with, like, over the holidays and you're going to watch fitness videos, if you have an expectation that you're going to have lost any weight as a result of that, well, guess what? Business is a lot like that. Like, people think they can read their way, and then this is the part. It's not just about knowledge. It's about integration of knowledge and skills into an actual practice that changes behavior, that then changes results. So what I ended up realizing is that if we could get people into a practice, then that's where value was created. Like, that's the value of leader development, is that it actually changes how people behave, how they show up, and that drives the results.
Okay.
So it's so when we started, because agriculture is so geographically dispersed, it can be, and people are super busy, conventional programs were not probably going to be a fit. And there's actually, for those who are geeky about this sort of stuff, the whole leader development space is actually in a bit of an upheaval globally, because there's now this convergence between neuroscience, leader development, HR, and even, I would say, adult learning theory. It's all converging, going, so what do we got to do to get people to really improve, like human performance, in a way that's like very, very similar to to maximum yield. Like, how can I absolutely max out the genetic potential of that canola crop or that soybean crop? That's the kind of questions that people are asking about leader effect is, what do we got to do to maximize the potential of any individual who wants that?
I love that.
Because it's complex, and so that's where I got excited, because then there's some technology involved. And so that's where really the LeaderShift Leader Development Program got started. And through the relationship with Farm Management Canada, they were part of the advisory process. Like, when we took it into an online, they consulted on it, made it, had some suggestions of how it could be strengthened. And so eventually over time they said, this is actually what's part of what's necessary to even execute on the farm business management skills that they've been offering and delivering and promoting for a really long time.
Okay.
And that's the part of, if you ever wonder why farm transitions don't happen the way they should, it's not because there's a lack of accounting or legal advice. It's not about the technical solutions, it's about the human systems. about like people and understanding what it's about, and that's can be very well understood from leader effectiveness models. And many people will even assert that, well, the senior generation are the ones that have to lead it because they're the ones, and I'm like, except we all know that many of them are very reluctant to do so.
Right.
I initiated our farm transition on our plan from below. I led up, not led. It wasn't.
Wouldn't that probably be the way it happens more often than
Yeah,
not?
sometimes. Well, I don't know.
I'm just thinking of people I know. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and I think the part about that excited me is that the people who come in, they're all over it, because they get it. They intuitively get it. And many have had experiences like this year. They will have had experiences where they went, wow, they really felt like that they had their Wile E. Coyote moment where they came up and it got really, really close, and they're like, man, I don't want to have that. I don't want to feel like that again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I think there's an element of myself that I might be able to optimize so that I make better choices. Because we all look awesome when we have $15 canola and $8 wheat, and we have a year, like a crop production year like we had in Manitoba in 2013 or across Western Canada. But it's years like this year that actually really separate out who's got the actual leader effectiveness skills and are able to hold and maintain results when it's really, really challenging.
Okay.
And that's the opportunity. And I'm actually quite optimistic about the number of calls we're getting, and I'm hoping to do more.
Excellent. So if farmers would like to connect with you,
Sure.
to chat a little bit more, to talk about coaching, to talk about the program, how can they connect with you?
I think most guys like text. So cell number would be 204-483-0197, and it's really important to understand that all calls are 100% confidential. In fact, no one will know that you're even working with LeaderShift unless you tell them.
I love that.
Because once it becomes more mainstream, people will be far more comfortable with it. Many are, but some are not, because many feel if they're calling for it that it must be a sign of not of strength but of weakness. And of course, that's again, a CEO mindset is one that has a learning mindset. They're all about development. So there's for some, it's not everyone, but there's that element. Yeah. So we throw that in. The other part, I would just be my email, which would be simply kelly@leader-shift.ca.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That was a fantastic episode. You have such a great depth of wisdom, and if anybody would like to know more, I encourage you guys to get in touch with Kelly. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you guys for joining us as well. I will see you on next week's episode. Bye, guys.
Happy holiday.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.